Live from Toronto, Canada, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. This is indeed The Conspiracy Show. I'm Richard Syrett. Come on in, hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and warm yourself by the fire. You are among friends. There are some potentially troubling changes coming to the way in which non-medical therapeutic practices, including various forms of talk therapy, psychotherapy, touch therapy, spiritual counseling, regression therapy, even yoga instruction, changes to the way these things are all regulated here in the province of Ontario. That, according to my guest who is standing by, it has to do with some amendments to existing pieces of legislation that were reportedly rammed through Queen's Park going back to 2007, and another piece that was passed hastily, she says, in 2015. And then any day now, perhaps, these changes will be signed into law. And I'm not really clear as to why they've not yet been signed. However, Grace Joubarne is the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover. It's all rather complicated, but it's important you need to hear about it and make up your own mind, whether you're a practitioner of some of these alternative forms of therapy or whether you use these other forms of therapy. Some are suggesting the provincial government is in cahoots with, you guessed it, Big Pharma and the psychiatric industry, and they want to ban all alternative modes of healing. And others are saying that's blowing this way out of proportion. We'll get to that in a moment, and you can decide for yourself. Please take a few moments and visit the website, strangeplanet.ca. And that's really just a landing page. And from there, you can go to the radio section, the TV section. There's a live events section. Speaking of the live events page, you'll want to go there and get details on my next live event, The Bilderbergs, coming Sunday, April the 17th at the University of Toronto. I'll be flying Daniel Estulin in from his home in Spain. Daniel is the Pulitzer Prize nominated author of the true story of the Bilderbergs. He'll be here to present a new documentary film called Bilderberg the Movie. This will be the Canadian theatrical premiere. And then Daniel will deliver a 90-minute presentation. And then there'll be a Q&A session and a meet and greet to follow. That's Sunday, April the 17th at the University of Toronto. Get more details and order tickets online at strangeplanet.ca. Go to the live events page. And you can also get tickets by visiting Patrick and Kadena, our dear friends at Conspiracy Culture, which is a very cool bookstore at 1344 Bloor Street West. Conspiracy Culture, you can buy tickets right in the store, or you can order them by phone at 416-916-1696. 416-916-1696, or you can go to their website, conspiracyculture.com, and you can order the tickets from their events page right online. The Bilderberg, Sunday, April the 17th. Hope to see you there. All right, attention must be paid. If you are one of the following people, you need to hear this. If you're not a registered psychotherapist who provides any sort of verbal or nonverbal therapy or counseling for emotional, behavioral, and cognitive issues, and especially those who do not sport a master's degree or an equivalent, which would include clergy, hypnotherapy, EFT, EMDR, Reiki, and NLP or neuro-linguistic programming practitioners, and holistic educators, you will be severely affected. Or, if you are one of the millions of people abandoning conventional treatments for emotional, mental, and physical issues of life in favor of dignified, effective alternatives and holistic education, again, you need to pay attention, because there is a new piece of legislation here in the province that's coming down the pipe. It's called the Controlled Act of Psychotherapy, and it's contained in an amendment to the Registered Health Professions Act, and it makes the treatment of human disturbances a controlled act, and only registered psychotherapists and select other licensed workers can do it. Here to tell us more about this piece of legislation and why we all should be concerned is Grace Joubarne, the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover. Grace, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. What is Tell me a little bit about the Registered Health Professions Act and what this amendment is exactly.
Well, the Registered Health the Registered Health Professions Act was intended in 1991 to actually protect all manner of healthcare and healthcare professionals, so that most of healthcare could stay in the public domain. In other words, the public would decide who survives and who doesn't.
That sounds like a good thing.
That's right, because it's in line with our constitutional rights and so on and so forth. Only those professions, healthcare professions, that were considered to be dangerous or which were engaged in dangerous activities such as psychiatry, medicine, things like that, anything that's going to cut into your body and so on and so forth, those would be regulated by controlled acts. The act would be very definable. So you'd have a defined act of, sticking something in somebody's ear, for example. That's controlled. Only certain people can do that. Removing teeth, only certain people can do that.
Right.
That's quite understandable. But what they've done is they've hijacked the Registered Health Professions Act. It seemed to us, as a result of some of the documentation that we've reviewed over the last 2 years, and it took us a long time to get to the bottom of this, is that more and more the advisors to the Minister of Health since about 2001 started to become more and more top-heavy in pharmaceutical-related advocates. So more and more you found this big hurry to regulate just about everything. And we found this urge to basically tell very safe practitioners that they had to be regulated, or eventually they'll be regulated out of business.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the last areas, actually the last area that the pharmaceutical drug companies, psychiatrists and psychologists had to take over was natural treatment for mental health issues. Okay? Now, they had to do that because people were just going by the millions to natural therapists, spiritual care, Reiki, all the natural stuff.
Right,
and
regression
so
therapy.
Exactly. So especially in Ontario, we were saving the government, the provincial government, $7 to $10 billion annually. The Fraser Institute did 2 marvelous studies, huge studies, and it showed that we were 100% safe. There was never a complaint about our work, never a complaint about anything except that they had to pay out of pocket. So in fact, what was happening more and more glaringly is that people were leaving and walking away from free health care and into natural therapies. Now, there's reasons for that, and you know what? I'd really just like to have the opportunity to explain to you what's going to happen when this psychotherapy-related legislation gets proclaimed, because it is already law. They secretly passed it in 2007. There was an MPP that said, gee, you brought this to us in the last 11th hour, and we don't even have time to look at it or discuss it with anybody, and it was passed. It was all introduced by one psychologist and the Minister of Health at the time, and in fact there were no supporting organizations. Since 2001, every organization has said the same thing. Hey, this violates the constitutional rights of everybody to choose their own practitioners.
Grace, just a point of clarification now.
Yeah.
What part of this was passed in 2007? The Controlled Act of Psychotherapy is...
Both. The Psychotherapy Act,
right,
and then the Controlled Act of Psychotherapy.
So what is then why are we talking about it now, just to clarify?
Well, because it was kept really hush-hush, and the people, as a matter of fact, it was interesting that psychotherapists were not even allowed at the table to help frame the legislation. Can you imagine that? Psychologists and psychiatrists were the only ones allowed to frame the legislation. And we found that more from our documentation that the ministry, the policy analysts tried their best to keep these people from hijacking the RHPA. There was no question about that. They kept repeating, you can't do this and you can't do that because this violates this, and you can't stop other people just because they're doing your work. You can't force them to join these colleges and so on and so forth.
Okay, but I need to be clear here because something is coming down the pipe now. You said something was passed in 2007. What's about, the penny's about to drop. What is that penny?
Okay. 2007, both laws were passed.
Right.
The legislation was amended. In 2015, secretly again, the Psychotherapy Act was proclaimed. That made it enforceable. That made the college be able to enforce anything that they wanted to enforce. They're totally unaccountable. They do whatever they like. Now, the only other thing that we're trying to stop is the Controlled Act of Psychotherapy, and it's due to be proclaimed any day now. This minister is a medical professional. He's a medical doctor, and he has gone out of his way to make sure that he proclaims all of this act, simply because it doesn't control just one act that you can define. It controls a whole profession.
Okay.
Now, where the damage is that this profession was never a profession until 2006. Until 2006, it was nothing but a psychological intervention, talk therapy. Then suddenly, psychologists started to redefine it as a whole bunch of approaches that the rest of us do, and that some people have been, or some practitioners have been doing for thousands of years.
Now, Grace, when you say the rest of us, maybe you could just take a moment and explain what type of therapy you're involved with.
Non-drug.
Non-drug,
completely natural, absolutely no diagnosis involved. Okay, so you're talking about spiritual care, holistic education, hypnotherapy, Reiki, polarity, reflexology, all of that kind of stuff.
So anyone who's involved in this, let's call it alternative
yes.
Health for emotional, mental issues, you now are in jeopardy of being essentially banned.
That's right. Even meditation, Zen, yoga, all exercises, anything for the prevention of illness, anything that's health and wellness.
Yoga? If someone is going to yoga for spiritual, emotional well-being, they could close down their yoga studio under the letter of the law.
Eventually, yes. When the Controlled Act goes through, this college will have the power to do whatever it wants to, and it can interpret anything the way it wants to. So if you go to the new dictionary of psychology in 2006, it was no coincidence that when they were ready to pass this law in 2007, they had on the books in the dictionary of psychology, in the background, they had taken 315 approaches that alternatives use, okay? Anything from active listening to dietary supplementation and health information and meditation and so on and so forth. They had taken that whole list and called it a psychotherapeutic technique or psychotherapeutic approach. So they took a psychotherapy, which never actually was a profession. It still doesn't have core competencies. It didn't have any requirements for education or anything else like that. There were no requirements where you could say, okay, there's a university degree in psychotherapy.
Right.
There wasn't any of that.
Okay, I've got to jump in, Grace, because we have to go into a break. We'll come back and continue to discuss this. Grace Joubarne is my guest. She is the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover, talking about an important piece of legislation in Ontario, and you need to know more about it, and we'll get to it right after this. We are back with Grace Joubarne, the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover. The website, you'll want to jot this down, stopsychotherapytakeover.ca. And we now have it, we are perhaps days, weeks away from a college of registered psychotherapists with enforcement powers to essentially put a controlled act into operation that would restrict a select group in the field of psychotherapy. If you're not licensed, if you don't have a master's degree, then you could be banned from practicing. Or if you're on the receiving end of this type of therapy, you could be prohibited from, according to Grace Joubarne and her legal advisors, according to this legislation, the letter of the law, you could be prevented from even going to a yoga studio for spiritual, emotional well-being. That sounds absolutely absurd on the surface. Now, the other thing that jumps out at me here are a clergy. Now, you go to a clergyman, a pastor, for counseling. You're having difficulties at home. You want to talk to your confessor. Are you saying that under the letter of the law, this new piece of legislation, that could be banned?
Well, the thing is that it's not going to be banned. You're going to have basically one choice, and that's spiritual psychotherapy. You see, because since 2006, they've been spirit washing all of their little nonsense, their psychology and psychiatry, so that now they're claiming that you will have to be required as a practitioner. You'll have to be trained as a spiritual psychotherapist. And the problem is with psychotherapy is that they use the medical model, which means that you're going to automatically get a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis.
And
now,
therefore a pill. Therefore you'll get a pill.
Well, eventually, of course, you'll get a pill. But the thing is that everybody knows by now that there is no scientific support for any mental health diagnosis. It's one great big fraud. Everybody knows that now. And the same thing with the treatment. There is no scientific support for any of the mental health treatments. Did you know that since the government has gotten involved in promoting mental health, the whole mental health business, and started streaming people to psychiatrists and psychologists, that the suicide rate has doubled?
Well, listen,
a lot of people don't know that.
Okay, I mean, I have members of the family that have mental illness. Most of us do. And I want to be very careful here because, listen, I know that it's not for everybody, but it does, for example, SSRI, secondary serotonin reuptake inhibitors. I know there's a controversy, but it has helped certain people. So I don't want to, paint with too large a brush stroke here, or too broad a brush stroke. But if we're talking about, for example, a piece of legislation that will require a clergyman to go before this newly created college of psychotherapists, and if they operate anything like the College of Physicians and Surgeons, we know how sort of secret they are. It's like the Kremlin. I mean, that to me is the disturbing part. Or if you want to go to, let's say you want to quit smoking and you want to go to a hypnotherapist, and they have, I mean, I know many people that have had great success. Yes. With hypnotherapists.
Well, Richard, they're not going to stop the client. What they're going to do is put the practitioners out of business. So when you come as a client to find somebody, you won't be able to find them. You're going to have to go to a registered psychotherapist. Now, the government, we can see in the government, bureaucrats were trying all along to tell this new college and its transitional council in the early days that, hey, wait a minute, we don't intend to legislate or force family therapists, marriage counselors, and all spiritual care people to join the college. But the public never heard that. The practitioners never heard that. They were told that it was inevitable, that they had to join this college. So thousands of them joined because they were so afraid of not being able to continue their work. They were actually told, a family therapist told us, that they were told that if they didn't join this College of Psychotherapy, that they would not be able to operate, to continue their family therapy business, but also they wouldn't be able to use their titles. They said, if you want to protect your family therapist title, you need to join the college. Well, after they join the college, lo and behold, they make regulations that they have to use the words registered psychotherapist first. So how would you like to go to a family therapist thinking you're getting family therapy, and in fact you're going to somebody who's a registered psychotherapist and who has to know all about diagnosis and all the classes of drugs and so on and so forth, and you end up with a mental illness diagnosis that you weren't intending to have just because you wanted to talk about grief or talk about a marriage breakup or whatever it was you wanted to talk about.
Right.
And they did the same thing with spiritual care workers. They've been telling them that they have to join and become a spiritual psychotherapist. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to continue. So they're not stopping the public. It's just that by
well, they're restricting my choice. They're restricting the choice of the public.
Well, of course, it's a back way to do. But the worst thing about it is that the Constitution absolutely makes it mandatory that if you're going to create a regulation, you must prove that that regulation is necessary. If you're going to impose restrictions on trade and commerce and people's liberties, you absolutely have to prove that there is a danger to the public if you don't do that. Well, in our case, we have proof that we are 100% safe, that there is no reason for this legislation. And when you start looking back at it, you find out that it's all done in concert with the TPP. The TPP, one of its purposes is to...
This is the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
That's
this
right.
is the world's largest trade organization once it comes into fruition.
And one of its main purposes, stated clearly, is that it's going to take the healthcare services of the world, okay, and make them internationally regulated. And, of course, that'll be regulated according to pharmaceutical drug and conventional treatment. And so in order to be able to get this TPP to work and to have everything in place when the TPP is ratified, I mean, it's signed, so it's just as good as done deal. But that's what they had to do, is they had to get all the rest of us, 10,000 or more practitioners, you call them alternative, but actually we were around long before the pharmaceutical drug companies came around. But all of this has to be in place by the time that TPP is ratified, so that in fact they can just immediately eliminate us, just boom, just like that, just by another little regulation.
So if you're let's say you're a regression or a hypnotherapist, let's start with that.
I'm a hypnotherapist, yes.
Okay, so you're a hypnotherapist, and maybe there's some Reiki as well, Reiki therapy.
Yes.
Now, once this comes into effect, you have to go before the College of Psychotherapists. And do you need to be newly accredited? Do you need to go back to school? Do you need... what's going to happen? Take me step by step. Or do you have to pay a license fee to them?
Well, that's just it. We're not even going to be allowed because we don't have psychotherapy or psychology or psychiatry or nursing background. None of us have any of that, or very few of us have any of that, and we don't have a master's degree. So automatically, we're not even permitted to apply, okay? And secondly, our work does not allow us to use diagnosis or drugs. And one of their standards of practice is that you must know how to diagnose, you must know how to, the drug categories and so on and so forth.
But
so the very stuff that we don't do is exactly what psychotherapy, the College of Psychotherapy will be enforcing.
But is there even a master's degree available in things like Reiki? No. So...
Well, there's none in psychotherapy either. Psychotherapy, there wasn't even common education amongst the people who used. The people who used psychotherapy were mostly psychologists and psychiatrists, okay? And there was the odd lay person that was doing it. But that's it.
It's essentially talk therapy, right?
Yeah. It was not a profession at any time until 2006 when they redefined psychotherapy as being a psychological intervention, and then all of a sudden made it into a whole profession all on its own by appropriating the work that all other people do. So that's how they manufactured a profession out of thin air by taking in and appropriating the rest of us. Now they've got control, and the Controlled Act is unlawful simply because they can't control a whole profession. You can only control an activity that is dangerous. There's nothing dangerous about talk therapy. Nobody's ever been killed by talk therapy.
No, ask Woody Allen. Woody Allen has been in psychoanalysis for 60 years. I don't know that it's done him any good, but it certainly hasn't harmed him. People find great comfort in that.
The petitioner is obligated to provide the proof that the legislation is required before that they can impose such a thing. And not just, it may be dangerous. And that's exactly how this legislation got started, is in about 2001, I guess it was. A psychologist said, psychotherapy may be dangerous. Well, off went these advisors, ministry advisors on their horses looking for trouble. And they didn't ask, could you show us the proof? No. They said about, we're going to have to legislate this. Oh, my gosh, we're just going to have to regulate this. So with this Controlled Act of Psychotherapy, it's not only regulating just one dangerous act, which there isn't any that exists. So today, 8 years after the legislation was passed, they still can't identify one single act in psychotherapy or anything else that's dangerous. But what's happened also is they've corralled every single possible therapy, traditional, holistic, spiritual care, energy. They've corralled all that as psychotherapy to be completely controlled by an out-of-control a new college. This new college is so non-transparent, so secretive, so absolutely mean with the rest of the population and with the people who inquire, practitioners who inquire, that when they posted on their website that Stop Psychotherapy Takeover was actually misleading and misinforming the public. So we wrote to them and said, well, could you tell us how we're doing that? Because that's the last thing we want to do. And they said, no, our lawyers said we don't have to answer these questions. So we said, okay, how about, you tell us which part of what we're doing is considered to be psychotherapy, is considered to be dangerous, and so on and so forth. Nope, we're not answering that. That's our lawyers advised not to answer that.
Well, they want power without accountability, and in my books, that's called tyranny.
Absolutely. And there's already 13 colleges that are set up exactly the same way, and under the Ontario regulations proposal, they were proposing to regulate all clinics, defining clinics as any place where health services are provided by one or more persons, okay, in Ontario. They had actually appropriated money from the colleges to do this pet project, and that project was to completely eliminate all natural therapists.
All right, let me just remind listeners that Grace Joubarne is with us. She is the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover. The website is stoppsychotherapytakeover.ca. And starting in 2007, the Liberal provincial government here in Ontario started to roll out secretly a series of pieces of legislation to amend, for example, the registered health. I'm sorry, what is the name
Regulated Health Profession.
The Regulated Health Profession Act. Create a college of psychotherapists. And what does that mean? It means that alternative types of psychotherapy, neurolinguistic programming, regression therapy, Reiki, all of these things now will fall under this College of Psychotherapists. And if you don't have the proper accreditation, a master's degree, and if you're not trained in diagnosis and administering drugs, then you're out of business. This, to me, is very disturbing. We'll continue to talk about this on the other side. You're listening to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. We are back with Grace Joubarne, the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover, and the website again, stoppsychotherapytakeover.ca. Let's just give our listeners a quick tour of that website because, for example, if they want to contact their MPP, you've made it very simple. Just let people know how they can navigate on the website and what they can find there.
Well, we try to make it a one-stop shop. You're going to find links to MPP letters. They're pre-formed. You just click on them. If you're a practitioner, you can send one that's practitioner designed. Another is for the citizens. You can subscribe either as a practitioner to get regular updates, or you can subscribe as a citizen, non-practitioner. There is also a way for you to help us out financially, because what we have to do is we have to build a really good, strong fund so that we can fight this in court, because this is completely unlawful legislation. It violates the the Regulated Health Professions Act, and it violates the Constitution. Absolutely.
Isn't it interesting that during elections, the parties never talk about what they are really planning to do, and they're usually substantial pieces of legislation. During the election, they talk about little tiny things that really don't matter. They're what we call political wedges. But here we have these pieces of legislation that the Liberals have passed since 2007. And as you point out on the website, under the law, there now is only one acceptable approach to the treatment of any human disturbance, and that is the medical drug model approved by psychologists and psychiatrists. Now, how many of us are even aware of this in this province? I would say less than 1% of us. This was all done secretly, without any discussion during an election. This is absolutely nefarious.
Well, this legislation was dumped into a huge omnibus bill, and even the MPPs didn't get a chance to look at it. So you can imagine this has been going on since about 2001, where it's all under the table and there's just one or two people that are pushing this and pushing this. I mean, when you say that psychotherapists themselves are saying, oh, like, why are we going to be regulated? Why do we have to be regulated? Gee, you know, like, this is weird, but can we sit in on the framing of the legislation? No, you can't. But, you know, to put it in a proper perspective, this is what I'd like to say, is that we want people to have options. We're not saying people shouldn't have options. That not at all. If you want to have drugs, you should have drugs.
Yes, and drugs can help certain people, absolutely.
But you need to have the facts before you say, oh, well, you know what, I like my psychiatrist and so on and so forth. Once you don't have an option, this is the track record of the only option that's left if this is allowed to stand, okay? Physicians are more than twice as likely as the general population to commit suicide, with psychiatrists 4 times as likely as the general population to commit suicide. 1 in 4 psychologists consider suicide at least once, and 1 in 16 have attempted at least one time to kill themselves. Psychologists are also those who have set up the torture programs at Guantanamo Bay. Okay, they're also, along with psychiatrists, the ones that were involved in the false memory scandals. False memory, satanic cult, those were all manufactured. Okay, this is going to really scare a lot of people. Of the physicians who committed suicide, 42% were being treated by a conventional mental health professional at the time of death. No, but one of the reasons why they're saying they have to legislate us is because, you know, they have to be sure that the public is safe. Well, there's no history of alternatives ever being involved in anything like that.
All right, but I think one of a very telling statistic that's on the website has to do with the success of the alternative fields of psychotherapy. You quote that it has become a $7 billion industry, as millions of people are voting with their feet or their dollars, if you will, leaving conventional treatment and going into things like, you know, for pain management, maybe they're going to hypnotherapy or they're going to Reiki.
We are not alternative forms of psychotherapy, Richard. That's
I understand.
Really,
what I use that word because when we talk about, you know, the conventional treatments, we all know what we mean. We mean the drug model. So that I don't mean it in a pejorative way at all.
No.
I mean the conventional orthodox medicine and then alternative treatments, which is I need an alternative. I need another way of doing things. That's all I mean by that.
That's right.
Okay, but a $7 billion industry. This, to me, is the motive for this. Correct? This is why they're
Richard, we don't cost the taxpayer 1 single cent. Not one. It's all out of pocket.
Exactly.
That's right. And so that is a profit that pharmaceutical drug companies would really like to keep in their pocket. I mean, let's face it, that's a lot of money.
Oh, I'll say.
All of the people that we see end up on drugs or in conventional treatment, then the taxpayer is going to pay the whole shebang, and the pharmaceutical drug companies are eventually going to have more and more customers.
All right, and when we come back, we'll talk about why Ontario and why listeners in other parts of Canada to this show and in the United States should be concerned about this. This is not simply a provincial matter. Back with more of my conversation with Grace Joubarne, co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover, here on The Conspiracy Show. And we are back with Grace Joubarne, who is the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover. Again, let me make you aware of the website. It's stoppsychotherapytakeover.ca. And I mentioned before the break that this is not just a provincial matter, but why are they doing it here in Ontario? You said there is a connection between this and the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Deal, the TPP, to make this sort of globally universal. Why Ontario first?
Well, the documentation that we found is that suggests that whatever happens in Ontario is going to go right across Canada. It will be the template. We have the biggest population. We have the biggest population of natural therapists here. Okay, and most of the money that's spent on natural therapies is spent in Ontario. So this is where they have to stop us. They actually have to stop natural therapies. Now, in the TTP, the TPP, sorry, it's very clear. It states that it wants to take all of healthcare worldwide and regulate it internationally. Okay, as one type, just the conventional treatment that we know of in North America. That's very, very clear. At the same time, what happened is in 1992, Prime Minister Mulroney went down to Rio and signed Canada over to the UN. So we have essentially the UN operating as a shadow government, and that's what we're seeing now in Ontario.
Well, that's true.
So,
They're controlling immigration
yes,
policy
absolutely.
across
And
North
not,
America.
They're not trying to be secretive about it. They're telling you straight. At the same time, they set up some organizations. One of them ones that we found out about is called CLEAR, C-L-E-A-R. And what they do is they train bureaucrats and authority figures, such as the registrars of various healthcare colleges and everything, in how to basically undermine our domestic laws and enforce international regulations. So that's why we saw in the documentation that we received where the minister, the policy analyst at the Ministry of Health in Ontario must have been pulling their hair out of their head trying to say, look, this is the law. This is the way it's supposed to be. You can't do this. You need to comply with this and comply with that. And basically, the new college is just saying, we'll do it our own way, and they're telling the public something entirely different.
Who's appointing the members of this College of Psychotherapists?
The minister.
And who are these? These are clinical psychiatrists.
For it was
medical
mostly
doctors.
No, we didn't see any medical doctors on there, but I'll tell you, the psychologists were pushing it all the way. As a matter of fact, at the very beginning, it was one psychologist plus the minister who put forward this referral to their advisors and basically said, here, we want this done, get it done, and then for the next 8 years, that's what they did.
If this sounds from these omnibus bills that are rammed through in secret, sounds familiar. Many of us will remember the federal bill C-51, which was to bring Canada into compliance with something called the Codex Alimentarius. And this had to do with vitamins and food supplements to the point where food was being categorized as a drug. And under the letter of the law, for example, if you were to give your son a blueberry because it's rich in antioxidants, I mean, that could be considered against the law because you're administering a drug. That's how ridiculous it gets.
Yes.
Now, you've had this piece of legislation looked at by a legal team. What did they tell you?
Oh, they said that when this goes to court, it will definitely be, definitely be set aside simply because it violates every provision of the Constitution and of the Registered Health Professions Act itself. But don't forget, once this TPP becomes enforced, then
it supersedes
basically
our
we're
laws.
without our Constitution and we're without anything because these TPPs, these trade deals, what they're about is to undermine and completely override our domestic laws.
Right. It's the destruction of the nation state. So,
exactly. And you wonder how our bureaucrats would be able to do that. But the thing is that they're trained by these international agencies in how to do that. And CLEAR is one of them. And we learned that, a card-carrying member of CLEAR is the registrar of this new College of Psychotherapy. And, of course, it answers for us all the many reasons why she's saying the exact opposite to what the bureaucrats are telling her. They're telling her one thing in the background, and we can show you where, at the same time, she's telling us the exact opposite. The exact opposite. She's saying that it's inevitable. It must be, family therapists must join the college, and spiritual care must join the college, and so on and so forth. If it wasn't for all these people being coerced into joining this college would have 57 people.
Right. So again, so I can make this clear to listeners how it'll affect them. Let's say, for example, you're suffering from chronic pain, and you've had it up to here with all of the drugs. The medication is leaving you in a fog. You're debilitated. You decide, I don't want to do drugs anymore. And so you seek a different way, and you go to see someone who's a regression a hypnotherapist, and they're helping you manage your pain. Perhaps you're getting some massage,
reflexology,
Reiki, all of these things. Now, unless that person is registered with the College of Psychotherapists, newly created by the province, and they have a master's degree, at least, in these fields, if there is such a thing.
Not yet.
Unless they have those things, they're out of business. You can't go see them.
Oh, just a minute now. Even if you join, even if I was to join the college and become a registered psychotherapist, I would not be able to offer the same services. I would have to offer only those services permitted by the College of Psychotherapy. And the services that I offer are not permitted by the College of Psychotherapy. I can only offer what it is that is within the scope of practice as defined by this college. And this college is totally unaccountable. They can make any rules or regulations that they want. And so consequently, what we've got here is we've got at least 13 healthcare colleges set up by this government that there's no reason for them to exist at all. The costs are downloaded to the patient, and you don't have your choice of practitioner.
And
you
again,
have the college's choice.
These practitioners must be schooled in diagnosis and
That's right.
and basically prescribing drugs.
Exactly. Well, because tomorrow the college can say, okay, you have to have this, you have to have that, and you're going to be doing it this way and that way. And you know what? Energy medicine is out, and you're going to do spiritual psychotherapy the way we tell you to do spiritual psychotherapy.
But you're telling me that a clergyman might be forced to write a prescription?
Oh, eventually, why not? They have the full power to do whatever they want, set up whatever regulation they want at any time. They're not accountable to anybody once they're set up.
But I mean, is that the letter of the law?
Well, the letter of the law is until it's defeated in court or until we get this Controlled Act repealed. What we're trying to do, okay, is we're trying to get this Controlled Act of Psychotherapy repealed before it's proclaimed, so it never comes into force. It's law, but so that it never can be enforced. And we're trying to get safe harbor legislation, such as they have in California and I think Minnesota and a couple of other places where psychologists tried exactly the same thing.
Okay, now the Controlled Act has gone through 2 readings in the provincial legislature?
No, it's law. It's gone through all the readings. It became law. Okay, it became law in 2007.
No, but
proclamation is that final little signature of the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. When he signs off, is John Henry, on those documents, they are enforceable. So the Minister of Health ordered the Lieutenant Governor to proclaim the Psychotherapy Act. There's only the Controlled Act of Psychotherapy that's left to proclaim.
Okay. So they just require the signature of the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, it's just a formality.
Okay. Now, this could happen any day. It could be several weeks.
It might already have happened because he did it to us with the Psychotherapy Act. We asked for the date, and 10 days after they had already proclaimed it, then they told the public. So they might have done it already.
So for people that are totally unaware of this, they're not going to realize what's going on until they go to see their hypnotherapist and the shop has been shuttered.
Exactly.
Or they go to the Reiki therapist and they're no longer there.
Exactly.
Are they going to have? Are they going to have? I know with Bill C-51, and I'm not sure what the status of that is. We sort of lost track of that. I think that may have died on the order table during an election.
Well, I'll tell you, nothing is going to die that's going to give the international powerhouses, their power.
Right.
This is already in place. Once Prime Minister Mulroney signed off in Rio, that was it. The UN has been operating as a shadow government, and the evidence is everywhere. These acts are going to go through. They've gone through. The only way they're going to stop is if the public gets absolutely outraged. But they're really smart. They're really clever, Richard. What they're doing is they're doing it a little bit at a time.
Yes, it's gradualism.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know that old saying, you can boil a frog if you just do it really, really slowly. He won't try to hop out of the water.
That's right.
Yes, and that's exactly what they've done. And as we look at all this documentation, all this research we've done over the 2 years, the 2 years, it is just stunning how clever these people are. They coordinate everything. I mean, when you take a whole dictionary of psychology and redefine a mere talk therapy and make it into a profession, practically overnight so that you can legitimize this new profession.
Right.
It's just stunning how clever that they are. But
Not
they're
to
not
be
going to let go. Like, I mean, they're like a dog with a bone.
Right.
You
I
know,
don't want to
with
be
a stake.
I don't want to be flippant, but just to sort of further illustrate the point, it's like, people used to go down to the pub and they wanted to bend the bartender's ear, and he'd sit there and listen. Listen to the person's problems. So I guess under this new act that the bartender would have to go before the College of Psychotherapists and make sure he has a master's degree, and it really boggles the mind. Now, give people an assignment. What do you want them to do, Grace?
Well, I would like everyone to get on there, send their letters to the MPPs, get on the phone, and make these MPPs earn their pay. Because what they're doing is they're just brushing us off. They're saying, oh, just contact the college. Well, this is about our personal liberties. This is about 10,000 people, mostly women, going to be thrown out of work simply because they are successful and the public loves them. That's why they're being thrown out of work. And so it means that people have to get really outraged and really start putting the pressure to their MPPs to come up with a better solution than to just blow us off. And we need the funding, folks. We really, really do. We can't do this alone. We've been doing most of it out of pocket. But this affects 14 million Ontarians, and I guarantee you that from the documentation we have seen that this is the template and this will go across Canada in nothing flat. That's the purpose of this legislation. They're bargaining on Canadians and especially Ontarians not paying attention. They're bargaining on us just going, oh, well, it's just a Reiki. Well, yeah, we need to be protected. And, the government means well. Well, the thing is that the more protected that they're trying to convince us that we need to be, the more danger that we're stepping into. This is extremely dangerous.
Grace, I gotta wrap it up here. I want to give the website one more time.
Yes.
Stop Psychotherapy Takeover.ca. Stop Psychotherapy Takeover.ca. Grace, I really appreciate your time, and we'll do a follow-up program on this down the road.
I'd love to do that because there's just so much to talk about.
All right, Grace. Thank you again.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye. Bye.
Grace Joubarne, the co-founder of Stop Psychotherapy Takeover. All right, the website, strangeplanet.ca. Say hello on Twitter @RichardSyrett, and as always, follow the truth.